Something you spoke about, which I find really fascinating, and you said we're going to get into this, but it's food addiction.
Yeah.
And so many people might be shocked to think that they could get addicted to ultra-processed foods. Other people might not be shocked and might feel that very strongly, that they can't kind of get off this roller coaster. They need that dopamine hit, that serotonin kind of uplift that they get when they have ultra-processed foods. Can you talk about a little bit about that? Like, how is this addictive and what is it doing to our brains?
So there was a politician the other day on a radio chat show who said, you know, are you, the journalist said, are you going to regulate food like you are tobacco? And she said, no, we won't, because it doesn't act like tobacco. You know, when you see people who've had amputations because of smoking, continuing to smoke, we can show that tobacco is addictive, but you don't see that with food. In fact, if you go to the diabetic ward at any hospital, you will see people with diet-induced type 2 diabetes having amputations and being unable to stop eating the food that's driving the diet-related disease, the metabolic syndrome causing the vascular problems. So we have very, very good evidence that food addiction does exist. But really, the evidence shows that people only become addicted to ultra-processed food. Almost, we have no data at all that people become addicted to food that's made by people that love them, food that people cook themselves at home. And for a long time, science has struggled really with two problems about food addiction, which are very real. The first is that food doesn't contain addictive molecules. So some people say that sugar's addictive, but we could have a bowl of sugar on the table. No one eats sugar with a spoonful, right? We don't generally eat honey straight from the jar. So people aren't addicted to sugar. Fat, similarly, we don't eat butter with a spoon, most people. But what we see is it's possible to bring ingredients together into formulations that people do become addicted to. Then the problem becomes that baked into the notion of addiction is a problem of abstinence. People can't be abstinent from food. And so declaring food to be addictive is a really legitimate problem. What it turns out is if you say that ultra-processed food is the only thing that people become addicted to, it sort of solves that problem. Now, in functional terms, UPF is the only food that many people can afford that's available to them. But at least theoretically, it is all discretionary. It didn't exist for most people 50, 60 years ago. You don't have to eat any of it other than for social and economic reasons. So you don't need it physiologically. So it does solve that problem. And we've got very, very good data. I mean, the definition of addiction is pretty straightforward, okay? We don't diagnose people with addiction by taking blood or putting them in a brain scanner. We ask them a set of questions, and the questions all revolve around the idea of, do you continue to use a substance despite wanting to stop using it? Do you use it in increasing dosages? And do you use it despite knowing it does you physical, social, or psychological harm? And if the answer to those questions is yes, then you probably have an addicted relationship. So I think we've got population data, we've got experimental data. I think food addiction is very real, and I say that with some degree of lived experience. You know, I think I have lived with a real addiction to these products.
And when did you kind of feel that you had an addiction to them through the research and go, oh my gosh, this is...
It was, this is a ticklish thing to talk about, and this may be somewhat triggering for some people, and I'm conscious that I say this as a man with some privilege, but I think for many years there was no great shame as a sort of bloke at a healthy weight to go and absolutely binge on stuff and make myself sick. And I've talked about this, and my brothers and I would all do this. And it never struck me as particularly disordered. It was a way of solving the problem of massive overeating. And it wasn't happening every day, but it might be every couple of weeks. And I think it was when I was suddenly released from the spell during the experiment where I was eating the UPF to excess that I suddenly went, oh, I really have been addicted. When I stopped craving it, that's when I kind of knew.
Wow. And so that, well, from what I'm hearing, is bulimia. That was kind of happening, but maybe not to an extent of doing it every day.
It's very tricky because, of course, the definition of a disorder has to include harm, and I wasn't necessarily being harmed by it. And also the motivation to do it was not about weight regulation or psychological control. It was much more, I would just eat 5,000 calories and be unable to sleep. So I sort of make myself sick for a practical reason. But it was my wife who said, I can go around in circles with it. In the end, my wife and my brother's wife said, this is not a normal relationship with food. And once you start to meet a community of people who are also affected, then you realize, addicts always have ways of justifying their behaviors. So I now have done some work and continue to do some work with the Royal College of Psychiatrists Eating Disorders faculty, because the hazard of this book, all the way through writing it, I was very aware that I'm treading this knife edge where there's a group of readers who feel addicted to this that I actually want to slightly disgust with this food, because that's what was given to me, and it's been like a gift, not wanting the food. At the same time, I don't want to stigmatize anyone, the millions of people who depend on this, and make them feel shame. And I certainly don't want to generate any eating disorders. Now, so I went and spoke to Agnes Ayton, who's the chair of that faculty at the Royal College. And they have early data that really, when it comes to binge eating disorders and a lot of disordered eating, they feel that ultra-processed food may be the driver of the disorders. And this is something that B. Wilson, who's a noted food journalist, has also written about. If you create food that is engineered to disrupt your relationship with food, to drive excessive consumption, food that contains neurotransmitters, food that affects your microbiome, that affects your brain in odd ways, perhaps it is the food that is part of the engine of the pandemic of eating disorders that we're seeing in young people. Now, eating disorders are very specific. There's a lot we don't understand. But I think I'm much more at ease going, this is food worthy of critique, provided it's done with compassion, and
favorite word,
and done with an awareness that when we critique food, we critique the people who eat it and the communities that eat it, and so we have to be just hyper aware. This is food for people who live. Whilst we all eat an amount of it, it is food that is forced on people who live in disadvantage, and particularly children. I'm
so happy you use compassion there, because I think maybe listening to this, and I want to highlight it now, many people might be feeling a lot of shame, or maybe feeling scared how much they're consuming, might not be aware how much they're consuming. It's quite a big thing. And I think I know that a lot of people can eat larger quantities of ultra-processed foods than whole foods. And can you explain why? And is there any kind of like scientific data that shows this on how much more we might consume? Because that's also a huge other trigger for people to stop eating. As you said, you were overeating and then you wanted to be sick because you could consume this amount of food because it was ultra-processed.
So I'm so pleased you've said that. You know, I did a lot of publicity around the book, and I was quite good at always putting in these caveats, and then you reach a sort of familiarity with it all and you think, well, everyone's heard me say that. But I think it's really important to say to people who are listening, if you are struggling with this food, it is food that has been engineered by, you have no idea of the number of PhDs that have gone into this sandwich, into every single one of the ingredients, the way they're put together, the packaging, the smell. Everything has been optimized to fiddle with your relationship with food and to get you to eat as much of it as possible. That's why when you eat this sandwich, you never leave a quarter. I mean, this sandwich has how many calories in per... God, my eyesight. Energy, kcal. Can you see how many calories per pack?
So per pack, you've got... Oh, wow.
How much is it?
862.
That's what I thought it said, but then I was like, really? I think you're right. I mean, that just feels ridiculous.
Feels mad, doesn't it?
No, it's 370. It's 370. They're doing joules and calories. I mean, they're making this very hard. The two of us, we know something about nutrition. Okay, so it's 370. Now, there are lots of...
Anyone else is confused, we're both
there, and also just we all need glasses. So there are lots of sandwiches in Pret that are over 500 calories. You will never, ever leave a quarter of a sandwich behind. You will be licking out every single last crumb. And that's because it's been designed. So if you're struggling with the food, the sort of strapline of the book is, it isn't you, it's the food. So how does it do it? What's the mechanism? We actually understand quite a lot about how the food does this. And we've got really good studies going back to the 90s that when food is soft and when it's energy dense, that those are two really important properties to drive excess consumption. So ultra-processed food, simply because it has been so physically mangled, chemically, thermally, and physically, it's been actually processed, very small particle size. This sandwich feels like it's got a bit of texture, but you can compare this to if you made this with rye bread and chunks of tuna and bigger bits of cucumber. It'd take you twice as long to eat.
That's a good point, actually.
The energy density is partly because the food is dry. Now, there is some illusions of moisture in a lot of the products that comes from using sugars and oils, but it's generally bone dry because water is expensive to ship around, and water reduces shelf life. So what you want is very, very dry food, so the food has a nearly infinite shelf life. What you want is to be able to make your mince pie, say, in February for next Christmas, because it's going to take the factory a long time to make, the 20 million that you need to produce. So the energy density and the softness mean you consume calories, you swallow them at a rate that your body has not evolved to keep up with. Real food, even a fatty marbled steak, A, you have to cut it and chew it, and B, steaks are full of water. They're actually quite low energy density, even if they're very fatty. So the second thing is the food tells you a series of lies. So whether it's the non-nutritive sweeteners or the flavor enhancers or the gums replacing the fat, there are lots of things that signals arrive in your mouth that then the nutrition doesn't deliver. So we understand this best with the artificial sweeteners or the non-nutritive sweeteners. It doesn't matter if they're natural. You don't taste sweet in your mouth, right? You don't have sweet detectors on your tongue because it's fun. Yeah. You have it to signal to the inside of your body, organs like your pancreas, that refined sugar is on its way, and so you better release insulin and other hormones to deal with the refined sugar. And this is why we have a sweet taste, because humans are quite good at eating sugar. Now, if you put sweet taste on the tongue and the sugar never arrives, we used to think that would then boost your insulin, lower your blood sugar, and then you'd eat more sugar elsewhere. So if you're drinking a Diet Cola, you'd eat more fries. It seems from a really big paper published last summer, most of the artificial sweeteners put your blood sugar up. So we think this is part of a stress response. If you put sweet on the tongue and the sugar never arrives, this is incredibly confusing for your body. For millions of years, if you put sweet taste on the tongue, sugar then arrives in the body, honey or whatever. So the lies seem to be important. Flavoring, coloring, marketing is a big part of excess consumption. But it's not so much about any one of the ingredients or properties. It's the whole gestalt, the entire, every single aspect of the food has been optimized. So you can't really tease it apart. It's like going, why are we all addicted to our phones? Are you addicted to your phone because of its camera or it's the apps, or is it the sleek feel or the buttons or the swipey?
It's the ping of a message, the dopamine hit that you get.
But it's all of it, isn't it? It's every aspect just designed, from the acoustic of the ping to your relationship with the brand. So you can't tease it apart. And that's a really important thing for understanding why you can't really reformulate ultra-processed food. So we see this, the best example is with a Diet Cola. I mean, Diet Cola is like the ultimate solution, isn't it? It's a perfect fix. They're basically indistinguishable, 0 calories. Why aren't diet drinks solving at least the proportion of the obesity epidemic that's due to soft drinks? They're just not, and we've massively increased our consumption. The non-nutritive sweeteners are probably a bit better than sugar. I mean, my colleagues who I really trust would all say that. I'm a bit on the fence about it, but they're probably not much worse. And yet they really aren't solving the problem. So even the best reformulation doesn't work. That's why we think that to change population health, we have to switch people away from an industrial diet back to sort of eating real food, traditional food.